If I asked you to name a survivor item in Dead by Daylight, you would probably choose one from either of these 5 categories: flashlights, medkits, toolboxes, keys and maps. But there's another category that is often overlooked: firecrackers. You see, despite the simplistic nature of these items, they actually have a rich history that dates way back to 2017. Not only that, but firecrackers also have a bunch of trivia related to them, from unreleased add-ons to much more. So in this video we're going to take a look at the fascinating history of firecrackers in DBD, and without any further ado, let's get right into it. The birth of firecrackers coincides with Dead by Daylight's first major event. I say major because although the game had a Blood Hunt mini-event at the end of 2016, it was pretty minor and the whole event simply consisted of just double blood points for a couple of days. But anyways, can you guess what DBD's first major event was? Maybe it was a Halloween event in order to fit with the game's horror theme. Or perhaps it was a Christmas event as a means to celebrate the coming of the winter season. Well, no, the first ever actual event in the game's history was in fact Chinese New Year 2017, the year of the rooster. Now, although this event was kinda tame and a little bit boring by today's standards, it did feature some cool stuff. There were 4 new shirts for Dwight, Meg, Jake and Claudette. But what we are going to focus on specifically is the introduction of the Chinese firecracker. This item was added on the 13th of February 2017, along with the release of patch 1.4.0. Originally, the rarity of the Chinese firecracker was common, which meant that players were able to very easily obtain the item, either by purchasing it in the Blood Web or by finding it in a chest during a trial. The Chinese firecracker essentially worked in the exact same way as firecrackers currently function, meaning that the item only had one use and it was able to blind the killer for 2.5 seconds as well as deafen them for 1 second upon being dropped. Though something to note is that originally, whenever a firecracker exploded, it would produce this high-pitched, tinnitus-like whistling sound. Take a listen. Yes, I guarantee that sound has not been edited in the video. Now, a few weeks after the Chinese New Year event ended, firecrackers were disabled from generating in chests or the Blood Web. However, players that had stockpiled on firecrackers before this change were still able to use them in-game. Apparently, the developers had intended to rework the item and later re-implement it with different variations and also some add-ons. And sure enough, after some time, these add-ons were found in the game files and leaked to the public. A lot of them are fairly basic. For instance, many of the add-ons simply increase either the explosion radius or the detonation delay or the blindness duration. But there are a few interesting ones that I wanted to talk about. The first one is called Buckshot. It's common rarity, but it does something that pretty much no other thing in Dead by Daylight can do, because as you can see, the effects of this add-on have varying numbers. For instance, the deafened status effect can be extended by a random value between 0 and 2 seconds, while the blindness duration can be increased by 1.5 to 2.5 seconds. Another interesting add-on is Black Powder, which is the only firecracker add-on of green rarity. This one increases the explosion radius by a whole 5 meters, and if you pair it with a yellow add-on called Magnesium Powder, you can get a firecracker that has a whopping 9.5 meter explosion radius. That's so big! Now, there aren't any purple firecracker add-ons, but there is an iridescent one. It's called Large Pack and it straight up gives your firecracker 2 more uses, meaning that you can basically just carry 3 firecrackers in one hand at a time, which is crazy. Unfortunately though, none of these add-ons were implemented in the game, but this didn't mean that the developers were finished with firecrackers. In fact, when the Winter Solstice 2017 event came around, they decided to introduce a brand new type of firecracker, the Winter Party Starter. This item essentially had the exact same functions as the original Chinese firecracker, with the exception that whenever a winter party starter exploded, it would produce these really cool little holiday-themed fireworks. Now, if you put both of these firecrackers side by side, you might notice a significant difference between them, which is the fact that they have different rarities. Now, why was the Chinese firecracker grey and the winter party starter green, when they were practically identical in terms of their effects? Well, I don't know honestly, and I guess the developers were also confused by this, because 10 months after the winter solstice event, they decided to change both firecrackers into the special event rarity. This was done as part of a global change aimed at standardizing the rarity of all event-related items, offerings and cosmetic pieces. Okay, so going back to firecrackers, it should be noted that both the Chinese and the winter ones have never really been considered as rare items. Chinese firecrackers always get re-enabled during the occasional Lunar New Year events, and you can acquire them through the Blood Web or by finding them in chests for the duration of said event. The same thing goes for winter party starters, which always come back for the yearly winter events. However, this is not the case with the next firecracker that we are going to discuss. You see, for DBD's 3rd anniversary event, the so-called 3rd year party starter was implemented. As usual, it was a carbon copy of the previous two firecrackers in terms of functionality, though it did feature some cool particles and unique sound effects. The reason why this firecracker is kind of rare is because it is not simply an anniversary firecracker that returns every year, but instead it was exclusive to the 3rd anniversary event that took place in 2019. So the only players that currently possess this item are those that actually played during that time. Well, that is if you don't count the fact that the 3rd year party starter was accidentally re-enabled to spawn on levels 8 and 16 in the Blood Web during the Gilded Stampede lunar event in February 2021. But overall it is a rare item, okay? Now, the 3rd year party starter was the last true firecracker that was added in Dead by Daylight. But this wasn't the end for firecrackers, or at least it wasn't the end for the idea of firecrackers. Because 2 years later, Leon Kennedy arrived in the realm of the entity, and he brought a new perk called Flashbang. I am not going to spend much time explaining how this perk works, because I am certain that most of you know that already. But in a way, flashbangs are kind of another type of firecracker, because they are functionally identical. Since the introduction of the flashbang perk, firecrackers have received no further changes, and this is where our story ends. Well, I guess that was it. We went through the entire history of firecrackers in Dead by Daylight. I hope you found this video entertaining. If you did, then make sure to let me know by leaving a like down below, and also I would be glad if you would consider subscribing as well. Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!